Now your attack is lowered. Hello once again and welcome to review number 3. This time around we'll be looking at the third generation of Pokemon and the most games yet, with Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Fire Red, and Leaf Green. So strap in, sit back, and hold this white herb to cure the status condition that is boredom. Let's go!
In Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, you play as a boy or girl who just moved from the Johto region to live in the Hoenn region. Here, you'll be going on a journey throughout the region to catch and battle Pokemon. The goal, once again, hasn't changed since the first or second generation: beat the gym leaders, beat the Elite Four, and finally beat the champion. You also have your rivals, plural, who aren't jerks this time around, as well as the new Team Magma and Team Aqua, two villainous groups with opposing ideals regarding the planet. As for Fire Red and Leaf Green, nothing has been altered from Red and Blue in terms of player objective. The transition from Game Boy Color to Game Boy Advance proved to be problematic. For starters, the new hardware meant new possibilities, but also meant higher resource costs and more work. This was partially negated by avoiding more detailed graphics. There was also external issues, such as Pokemon's popularity plummeting from its once great heights. This pressure caused the game's director, Junichi Masuda, to experience stomach pain from stress, requiring a gastroscopy. However, he persevered and continued development anyway. Hoenn was based off of the island Kyushu in Japan, where Masuda attempted to recapture his childhood experiences there. Ruby and Sapphire was released in Japan the 21st of November 2002, and less than 2 years after that, on the 16th of September 2004, Pokemon Emerald was released. Didn't find any interesting background info on Pokemon Emerald. As for Fire Red and Leaf Green, while the international release of Pokemon was called Red and Blue, Junichi Masuda decided to go with Fire Red and Leaf Green, since he felt that Fire Red and Water Blue didn't feel right. The conflicting concepts of fire and water felt unnecessary in an already conflicted world, so Leaf Green was chosen to suggest a more peaceful world. Fire Red and Leaf Green were created partially so that the players could transfer older Pokemon to the newer games, since you couldn't transfer between Gen 3 and the games before. These games came out in Japan on the 29th of January 2004. The move to a new console, I think, was really good for Pokemon's music. No longer are we bound to the likes of 8-bit music and can instead have more versatile melodies with drums and trumpets. Lots of trumpets. I definitely think that so far Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald have the best soundtrack. You have bangers such as Littleroot Town, Route 111, the battle theme for Maxine Archie, the Regisa's theme, and the Elite Four. There were some notable stinkers though, I think, such as Fall Arbor Town, whose deep background notes or whatever I don't particularly fancy, and also the theme for the Trick House, which I think sounds like a mess. Overall though, excellent soundtrack for these 3 games. Before I start talking about the remakes of soundtracks, I just wanted to mention that I've changed my opinion regarding some Gen 1 tracks. Amongst others, I think I gave tracks such as Route 6, Cerulean City, and Silphco way lower scores than what they deserve. With that being said, I think that Fire Red and Leaf Green soundtrack was an excellent transition over from the Game Boy. Granted, there were some tracks that I think became worse, not necessarily bad, but I do think they were a downgrade. Pallet Town, SS Anne, Lavender Town, and Pokemon Tower are examples of this. Other than those though, I do think a lot of tracks were either on par with or better than the original, such as the Champion theme. There were also tracks added over from Gold and Silver for the post-game, which I thought was pretty cool. Despite not going for the most detailed graphics, I still think they're an upgrade compared to the previous 8-bit graphics. They're more pleasant to look at, and things like battles showing the terrain you're battling on was a nice touch. I don't really have much else to say about the graphics. I think they're just solid, so let's move on to... Generation 3 added 135 new freaks to the world of Pokemon. Compared to Gen 2 before, there weren't really any new evolutions to older Pokemon, aside from Azumarill and Wobbuffet becoming proud parents. But hey, that just means we get more new, fresh pocket monsters this time around. Something new added was Pokemon being able to change forms while remaining the same Pokemon. There was Unknown the generation before, but that was merely a cosmetic form change that doesn't change how Unknown works in battle. Back to Gen 3 though, the Pokemon that received different forms was the DNA Pokemon Deoxys, having a base form and then 3 other forms going into offense, defense, and speed respectively. There was also Cast Form, whose form changes depending on the current weather condition. Now, Deoxys I think was handled well, no gripes there, but Cast Form? Well, firstly, like I said, you need to set up weather in order for Cast Form to change, which is easier said than done. This is because Cast Form doesn't have the stats to properly change on its own, as it's too slow and frail to do so. Secondly, I think Cast Form should have gotten a Sandstorm form. I know it's not a real weather in our world, but in Pokemon it is treated the same as the real weather conditions, with Sandstorm interacting similarly with items, abilities, and moves. This doesn't fix Cast Form's stat problem though, does it? I propose that after reaching a certain level and being in a specific weather form, Cast Form is to evolve into a new Pokemon with not just higher stats, but also the ability to summon the related weather. Speaking of summoning weather, the box legendaries, Groudon and Kyogre. I really like these big fellas. With their cool and interesting lore combined with actual plot relevance, they definitely come across as more imposing and powerful compared to Ho-Oh and Lugia one generation before. They are each said to be the personification of land and sea, a claim most likely brought about by their individual abilities. Groudon can expand continents with light and heat, while Kyogre can expand the sea with heavy rain and tidal waves. They are also known for their intense battles with one another, cataclysmic clashes that can only be stopped by the third box legendary, Rayquaza, mascot of Pokemon Emerald. Mwah! Beautiful lore. Though it is a little funny how Kyogre hasn't won. It has the type advantage and the whole goddamn sea on its side, compared to Groudon and its tiny patch of dirt. But that just makes me like Groudon even more. It is at a comical disadvantage, yet still manages to go toe-to-toe with Kyogre. Mad respect for the giant land lizard. On the subject of legendary Pokemon, we also have the Regis and the Lati twins. The former is pretty cool. They are said to be artificially created Pokemon who at one point were worshipped but later became feared for their power, leading to them being locked away. This, combined with their strange robotic designs, makes Regirock, Regice, and Registeel an interesting trio of Pokemon. For the time being, Latios and Latias, on the other hand, I have mixed feelings about. Despite having near identical body shapes, I find Latias more appealing than Latios. I think it's because I find Latias' cuteness to be more complementary to its goofy body, compared to Latios, whose coolness doesn't match it at all in my opinion. With that being said, I don't really want to alter its design as it feels uniquely weird. I do not feel the same way about Manectric. This lightning dog suffers from the same problems as Latios, where I think its coolness is lost thanks to its dorky body. To quote another channel, it's supposed to be fast, but it's not aerodynamic. Every part of it sticks up. I think that's the main problem here. It wants to be quick and agile and a sort of lightning rod at the same time. Two concepts which in this case goes against each other. Perhaps Manectric should have leaned more into just one concept. I opt for the lightning rod aspect more, since I think the electric type has plenty of fast Pokemon already. Regarding all other Gen 3 Pokemon, I think most of them are solid, but I do have some gripes. I feel like a lot of Gen 3 Pokemon have unfortunate stats. Luvdisc, Volbeat, Illumise, Tropius, Delcatty, and Spinda are examples of this. Now, a lot of them could just be given evolutions with higher stats to fix this issue, but I don't feel the same way for these two. Now, Delcatty I just really like the design of and don't really want to change, so it could just be given higher and altered stats. Tropius, on the other hand, has the problem of looking like a final evolution, but not really having the stats to match, in my opinion. I suppose you could give Tropius higher stats and then give it a pre-evolution as well to justify the new stats. Since we're talking about the Kanto remakes as well, I'd like to share some new thoughts regarding the Kantomons. Firstly, my view on Mew isn't as bad anymore, as I can see and appreciate its weird and almost alien design, with that long, slender tail. I still remain decently against its ancestor status though, as I don't feel like sufficient evidence and reasonings have been given to uphold such a title. But whatever. Beyond that, I think some Gen 1 Pokemon deserve new evolutions. Farfetch'd, for example. Good design, but its stats make it difficult to use on its own. Should evolve. And then Parasect. Oh, sweet, sweet Parasect. Horrible offensive and defensive typing combined with horrendous speed and a bad move pull. Sadly, the speed is nothing we can do about. This is because Parasect is one of very few Pokemon with access to the move Spore, a 100% accurate move that puts the target to sleep. A very powerful move negated by the fact that only slow Pokemon can use it. But we can still try to fix its other problems. We can give it an evolution that gives it a better attack stat, an ability that negates one of its biggest weaknesses, fire, and lastly some more useful moves, including a signature one. In Hoenn, you'll have two rivals. Depending on your chosen gender, you get either Brendan or May, as well as Wally, regardless of your gender. Brendan and May are basically the same character, where they're kinda just your buddy. Their goal isn't to become the strongest trainer, and instead they want to help their dad, Professor Birch, finish the Pokédex. This is a nice change of pace compared to the previous generations, where your rivals were mostly just assholes wishing to be strong. You could totally have a rival who's not that interested in battling, especially when you have a second rival that could fill that role. That being said, I'm not so sure about the execution of Brendan and May. You want me to believe that you care about filling out the Pokédex with a final team like this? I would assume one who wants to finish the Pokédex would have explored the desert, the depths of the sea, and the icy caves, of which clearly you two have not. There's also no cool final battle with Brendan or May. Your last battle with them is in Lily Cove, an optional battle by the way, where upon their defeat they're basically just like, alright, I filled my Pokédex up plenty, I'ma go home now. See ya! I suggest instead that the final battle be before you go into Victory Road, where your rival will have a team that actually proves they committed to filling out the Pokédex. All the habitats, forest, desert, cave, cold cave, cemetery, and sea/deep sea. Also, having May have Gorobus and Brendan having Huntail gives them a little semblance of individuality. Moreover, this theme of different habitats ties Brendan or May together to their dad, whose specialty is Pokemon habitats. Anyway, after this battle, I feel like Brendan and May have the right to say that they have filled out the Pokédex. Perhaps they should also wish you good luck with the champion battle, and that they're rooting for you. Your other rival, Wally, is also not a big piece of shit. He is instead a boy who wants to go outside and train Pokemon, but his unspecified sickness prevents him from doing so. It's assumed to be something like asthma or something similar, as Wally moves to Verdanturf because of its remarkable cleanliness. Now, Wally's final team is fine. It's definitely better than your other rivals' team. I also like to think that his improved sickness can be seen with his Pokemon, as he now has a team with Animal Dander and Pollen, potential triggers of asthma. And just in case something bad were to happen, he's got his Gardevoir to protect him, and Altaria, whose pre-evolution is said to keep things clean. My main problem with Wally is that I wanted more of him. You're introduced to him in Petalburg, fight him in Mauville, and then a whopping 6 gym badges later, right before you exit Victory Road, you have your final battle with him. Give my man 1 or 2 more interactions with me, like a battle before you cross over to the west side of Route 118, and then another after beating Tate and Liza. Going back to his final team, while he actually evolves his Pokemon, I have to say, his choices are kinda bad. Delcatty and Roselia are very slow and frail Pokemon, and Magneton, come on man. Blue and Yellow and Silver and Gen 2 already had a Magneton. I think you can pick another Pokemon. Here's my new team for Wally. He keeps his Altaria and Gardevoir, but gets some new Dander and Pollen with Manectric and Vileplume, as well as some new triggers of asthma in Wheezing Smoke and Walreign's Cold Weather. This also gets rid of that pesky Magneton. Moving on from the likes of Team Rocket, we now have 2 evil teams, Team Magma and Team Aqua. Their goal is to expand the landmass and sea respectively, using Groudon or Kyogre to achieve said goal. Now, Team Rocket did what they did for the sake of profit, so what motivation do these new teams have? Well, that answer should be found in their respective leaders, Maxie and Archie. Right? Let's start with Maxie. In Ruby, when you first meet him, he tells you, and I quote, "Pokemon, people, all life exists on land. That's why Team Magma is trying to expand the world's landmass." Maxie, do you know where you live? Have you seen a Magikarp, Maxie? Now later at Mount Chimney, he instead talks about how humans grew on land and by expanding it we can advance even further. This is a way better reasoning. Crazy, yes, but there is at least some logic behind it. I think the writers realized how stupid that previous explanation was, as it's absent in Emerald in favor of the human advancement argument. Now Archie, compared to Maxie and Ruby, isn't as illogical. In Sapphire, he argues that all life, humans and Pokemon, depends on the sea, and therefore its expansion would be a good thing. Again, there is some semblance of logic in this argument for how insane it is. The problem is that he also claims, and I quote, "We will return the world back to nature for the good of Pokemon." This kinda clashes with the previous argument, which was for people and Pokemon, yet this argument seems to want humans out of the picture. Emerald once again fixed this by only having one of these arguments. Now, as for their teams, I have to say, they're lacking a bit. Only 3 Pokemon each for their final team? Come on, guys, really? You guys have the resources to get a Master Ball, and you don't even use one to capture Groudon or Kyogre? I guess that Groudon and Kyogre are supposed to be too powerful to handle, but if that's the case, then why can you catch them with a Master Ball? I suggest that for Ruby and Sapphire, Maxie and Archie are more successful in obtaining the legendaries, having final teams consisting of Groudon or Kyogre, their main Pokemon, and then a bunch of Pokemon who could take advantage of Sun or Rain. After this battle, the legendaries take back their control and start wreaking havoc as per usual. But speaking of Pokemon Emerald, Rayquaza can't really be utilized the same way as I did with Groudon or Kyogre. There's no trainer who wishes to expand the sky, whatever that means. I also don't really recall there being any struggle to get Rayquaza to help you. You just kinda wake it up from its nap at Sky Pillar, and then it goes to stop the other two legendaries. Now, what I'm about to suggest is not necessary whatsoever, I just think it'd be interesting. You can fix both of these problems by having a trainer who wishes to use Rayquaza for some nefarious means. Everyone, I give you Irma. Her goal isn't to expand the sky, but she does wish to get a hold of Rayquaza. She recognizes that the land and sea should exist together and sees no reason for why one should exist more than the other. But just like the other two, she sees this in the most crazy way possible. When she says that the land and sea are equals, she also thinks that they should be equal. Her plan is to let Maxine Archie awaken Groudon and Kyogre, and later take control of Rayquaza herself. By having it under her control, she can control the other two, meaning she can divide the planet into one half land, the other half sea, making them truly equal to her. Irma would then have a team consisting of Rayquaza and other Pokemon relating to flight or wind, having Skarmory as her ace. Upon her defeat, she sees the destruction the other two legendaries would bring to the life on the planet, and releases Rayquaza to do their thing. Of course, Irma would need to make appearances before Sky Pillar, so she may be properly introduced as a character alongside her views on the world. The only father to actually come back with the milk, Norman. He is the gym leader of Petalburg Gym, as well as the first one that you meet. But he refuses to fight you until you have at least 4 gym badges. Now, there's nothing wrong with having him as the 5th gym leader, but imagine how satisfying it would be if he was the last gym leader. The 4 gym badge nonsense clearly indicates that he only wants to fight you when he thinks you can take him on. No other gym leader in the game does this. They fight you no matter how many gym badges you have. He clearly states that he only wants a challenging battle with the player, and when you do beat him, he's confused that he lost. If this is how he sees you, imagine how satisfying it would be to defeat him if he demanded 7 gym badges, just to give you the chance of defeating him. If I could make a new team for Norman, I'd like his team to lean into the move Facade, as well as his slacking being rid of Truant, an ability that only allows a Pokemon to attack every other turn. This means his battle should be a double battle to make everything work. More on that later. But now we have several problems. For one, if his gym is the last one, then it can't really be located in Petalburg anymore, as it means you would have to go from Setopolis back to Petalburg and then return to Setopolis or Pacifidlog to surf to Victory Road. Now this can be solved by having his gym located in Pacifidlog instead. However, Petalburg Gym is also where Norman states that he only wants to fight you if you're strong enough, as well as where Wally is introduced, seeking aid in catching a Pokemon. These two crucial plot points can still be executed without the gym. Wally already lives in Petalburg during this point in the game, so just have Norman coincidentally be there because Wally's family, or even just Wally himself, sought help to catch a Pokemon. Hoenn has 2 different rivals depending on which game you're playing. For Ruby and Sapphire, you get Steven Stone, and for Emerald, you get Wallace. Starting with Steven, he definitely has the team to be a champion, and you interact with him plenty in the game, definitely more than Lance one generation before. That being said, I don't really feel like there's much else to Steven. Blue being your rival and Lance being a strong trainer from the previous games certainly makes their champion battles feel more impactful. Steven has no such luxuries, but again, his team members are solid, although they could probably do with some better move pulls, and he does interact more with the player throughout their journey compared to Lance. I wish I could say the same thing for Wallace. He is introduced basically near the end of the game, and while water isn't the worst type in the world, choosing to only specialize in water means he can much easier be taken out by 1 or 2 typings. Also, Steven can set up Reflect and Light Screen to make his team even bulkier, whereas Wallace cannot. If I could remake Wallace's champion team, I'd lean into his beauty and elegance, having a team that reflects that more. The Milotic, Ninetales, Gardevoir, and Blossom falls into your standard beauty, Machamp falls more into a bodybuilder type of beauty, and Raichu knows the move Attract. Yeah, I'll admit, Raichu isn't the best option for beauty, quote-unquote. I wanted an electric type to deal with flying types as well as a fast Pokemon that could set up Light Screen. Raichu was also the last Pokemon added to the team, and I was very tempted to have Wallace's entire team be Monotype. But hey, 5 out of 6 is pretty good, and I still think it's better than his old team. And hey, we're all beautiful in our own special way. I still think Steven made the better champion by actually showing up throughout the game. As for the story in Fire Red and Leaf Green, it has been essentially unchanged from the original games. Perhaps with the exception of Giovanni stating that he will dedicate his life to training Pokemon instead of studying them. Apart from that though, everything is basically the same. Although the post-game did add some new interesting stuff. After Giovanni leaves, you can find some Rocket Grunts in a warehouse with similar teams to the Rocket executives in Gold and Silver. One even talks about resurrecting Team Rocket and finding Giovanni. These grunts are obviously meant to be said executives, but I do think it's funny how their teams are better as grunts than executives, going down like 20 levels and opting for worse Pokemon in the sequels. Compared to Johto, I think Hoenn brought a lot to the table to make it stand out. Sure, it has things we've seen before: cozy starting town, big city, island city, harbor, forest, caves, icy cave, ghost tower, and water. But for the first time, we have a desert, visible volcano, dusty route, weather institute, space station, hot spring town, treehouse city, and water town. You can even go underwater this time around. Now, while Mount Pyre is basically just Kantos' Pokemon Tower again, its summit does hold something special. Orbs! These orbs hold a special connection with Kyogre and Groudon, where the orb of the opposite color seemingly wakes them up from their ancient slumber. Hence why Team Magma and Aqua steal these orbs. Fun fact, if you return to Mount Pyre's summit after dealing with Groudon and or Kyogre, you can find the evil team leaders returning the orbs. I'd say the most interesting city is Sotopolis City. In Generation 3, it's a volcano that erupted many years ago, forcing itself out of the sea and then eventually filling up with rainwater. A cool concept for a city. In the city, we also have the Cave of Origin, said to be the cave where life begins, which connects it to Mount Pyre, which is said to be where life ends. The worst city in Hoenn, on the other hand, hands down, is Evergrande City. This is not a city. This is Route 135. There are no people seen outside of the Pokemon League and the Pokemon Center. If you're gonna call it a city, at least have a few people and houses sprinkled throughout. Evergrande City? More like Nevergrande City. Now, before I start blabbering about the Sevi Islands, I'd like to mention that I don't see Cerulean as too lame anymore, for how late in the game it is. I didn't see Cerulean Cave as a part of the city before, since it was more outside the city. But I mean, it's called Cerulean Cave, what was I thinking? Of course the cave that holds a freakish mutant should be seen as part of the city. Moving on to the Sevi Islands, an appreciated addition to Kanto. The Sevi Island consists of 7 islands, all that have their own unique little things. One island is where you can find Moltres and the other fire types now. 2 Island has a move tutor that teaches 3 powerful moves to your fully evolved Max Friendship starter Pokemon. And 3 Island is where you save a girl from a Hypno. As for the post-game islands, on 4 Island you get to interact with Lorelei of the Elite Four, helping her deal with some Rocket Grunts in Icefall Cave. 5 Island is where you get to fight the to-be Rocket executives. 6 Island I'll talk about later, and 7 Island holds the Battle Tower. Now, 6 Island doesn't really have anything interesting in the games. With events, it was meant to house Gen 2 Pokemon not found elsewhere in Fire Red and Leaf Green, but these events never happened, meaning 6 Island never reached its full potential. But overall, I think the Sevi Islands are a welcome addition to Kanto. Generation 3 added many things to the franchise, such as running, so you can go slightly faster without having to wait for the bike, as well as a way better storage system for your Pokemon. Instead of just being multiple lists to store your Pokemon, now you can instead have boxes to place your Pokemon in, showing all Pokemon in a box at a given time, and having to scroll until you get a specific Pokemon is a thing of the past. You also no longer need to switch to another box for wild Pokemon once it's full. The new system just automatically sends the new wild Pokemon to the next box. Gen 3 gave us the move reminder as well, allowing your Pokemon to relearn old moves that you may want back, but also, in some cases, allows your Pokemon to learn new moves not obtainable at a later level. Generation 3 also introduced Natures. These may affect a Pokemon's stats by raising one stat by 10% and decreasing another by 10%. That or they do absolutely nothing. It can be any of the 6 main stats besides HP. But of course, these aren't the only new additions and or improvements that Generation 3 brought. Once again, we have a Safari Zone. Returning from the first games in the franchise, the Safari Zone is of course a place where you can catch a bunch of Pokemon, many of which are unique to only the Safari Zone. This time around, the Safari Zone houses way more exclusive Pokemon compared to the original Safari Zone and the bug catching contest in Johto. Also, unlike the bug catching contest, you don't have to wait until a specific day of the week just to participate. The only thing I really dislike about Hoenn's Safari Zone is that you need a Pokeblock case to be allowed entry. The Pokeblock case contains Pokeblocks, which can be placed in feeders to affect the natures of the Safari Zone's Pokemon. A semi-useful way to get more exact natures from Pokemon. My only issue is that I simply do not care. I don't care immensely about the nature of my Pokemon most of the time. But even if I did, why do I need a glorified Pez dispenser to merely catch the Pokemon? You can catch Pokemon just fine without a Pokeblock case, so I fail to see why it is needed. A new addition to Pokemon came in the form of abilities, passive effects that can do anything from lowering your opponent's attack stat to making your Pokemon immune to certain attacks. Abilities can also have effects outside of battles, like making wild Pokemon less likely appear, or making them more likely to appear. Now I'd say most abilities are somewhat useful. Some abilities in Gen 3 are, granted, not that good in battle, but they became a little more useful later on. You can also make strategies by combining moves with abilities, like Rest and Early Bird, to heal a Pokemon without items. Now, while I think abilities are fine additions, I do think one ability should be added. A special attack version of Intimidate. You know, to even the playing field. But of course, I also think some abilities are more useful in... Double battles had its start in Generation 3. Now, instead of one-on-one battles, 2 teams of 2 can duke it out against one another, where you now have to take new factors into consideration during battling. Some moves can hit multiple Pokemon at the same time, sometimes including your ally Pokemon. Some moves can be used to help out your ally Pokemon. Some moves become more useful in double battles. Some abilities can only work in double battles. And all of this could culminate into a bunch of strategies that can't be performed in single battles. And of course, it's barely used. I think this is the lamest decision in all of Gen 3. I would have loved to play an entire game in the doubles format. not going too far from the original games, but still feeling new and exciting. I can understand why Fire Red and Leaf Green should stay in the singles format, as they are remakes of single format games, but I think it's so disappointing that the other games had an interesting idea that they then basically did nothing with. This is the one change I would do to Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, having most, if not the whole game, be in double battles. All the teams I have designed for Ruby and Sapphire and Emerald in this video have been for double battles, examples of a concept that should have been used to its full potential. When it comes to gameplay improvements in Emerald, I'd say it mostly lies in a slight increase in game difficulty and a slightly better post-game. Gym leaders have all in all harder teams with more Pokemon and use held items. Sure, they only put held items on one of their Pokemon, and it's usually only a healing berry like citrus or oran berries, but some gym leaders, like Flannery, uses a white herb to negate the negative effects of overheat. There is also Juan, who utilizes a Chesto Berry rest combo to fully heal up his Kingdra without it falling asleep. And of course we have the post-game. Though not as cool as Gold and Silver's post-game in my opinion, I do think it's more than what Ruby and Sapphire offered. While he isn't the champion anymore, Steven Stone can be found in the post-game, with the highest level team in the entire game, making it feel like the peak of my adventure in Pokemon Emerald. Then we of course have everyone's favorite Battle Frontier, housing 7 facilities where after long enough winning streaks, you get silver and later gold medals for each facility. This will culminate in a post-game that is sure to last a while. A long while. I'll talk more about the Battle Frontier and Emerald's post-game later, but either way I can't deny that Emerald really had a lot in terms of post-game content. I also think Emerald added a lot more to warrant a third version compared to the other two third versions. Fire Red and Leaf Green being in the third generation of Pokemon means that they can have the new improved additions found in Gen 2 and 3. Move Deleter, a bigger post-game, better item and Pokemon storage, abilities, the Steel and Dark type, and the removed special stat. We of course also have a female protagonist for Kanto now, Leaf. Now this is obviously good for inclusivity, but also because I don't really want to play as Red anymore. After Gen 2's post-game, I can't really see myself in Red anymore, as he feels too much like his own character. I don't feel like I'm playing as a boy whose canonical name is Red. I just feel like I'm playing as the character Red, the final trainer in Generation 2's post-game. But whatever, Leaf saves the day, so let's move on to the other improvements in Fire Red and Leaf Green. The levels of Pokemon caught via the Super Rod are no longer underleveled. Now they are on par with the Pokemon you find in tall grass during the acquisition of the Super Rod. Moreover, the money you now lose is no longer cut in half, and instead uses a formula based on your highest level Pokemon and your badge count. These games also introduced the Versus Seeker, allowing you to instantly rematch certain overworld trainers. This can be very useful for grinding, as trainer battles reward more experience than wild ones. Fire Red and Leaf Green also have move tutors, who teach out moves to Pokemon similar to TMs. There was technically one move tutor in Pokemon Crystal, but he is only around on Wednesdays and Saturdays after beating the champion, has only 3 moves to offer, and you have to pay him in coins, which you have to either gamble for or pay for. Fire Red and Leaf Green, on the other hand, have 16 moves taught via tutoring before the post-game, and they can teach you at any time for free. The only downsides to these tutors is that they are at different locations and one tutor has only one move to offer once. But I still think that's better than Crystal's singular crappy move tutor. And lastly, of course, my favorite addition to the Kanto remakes, an actual post-game. Like I've said before, you visit the Sevi Islands, where you can find a bunch of Gen 2 Pokemon and get some foreshadowing to the sequels. However, the best part of the post-game is the Elite Four and Champion rematch. All the Elite Four members and Champion have buffed up teams and have added some Gen 2 Pokemon, making their teams feel new and fresh. I'm not lying when I say I might prefer the final battle with Blue here than I do with Red in Gold, Silver, and Crystal. Red may be powerful, but Blue has been with you since the very beginning, talking shit and being a dick throughout the whole way. Of course I'm going to think smacking him about is going to be way more satisfying than with Red. But I do have some gripes with the post-game. First of all, you need to catch 60 different Pokemon in order to get the rest of the Sevi Islands and the rematches to follow. This, I think, is very lame, since I don't really feel like filling out the Pokédex to be the main goal. My other problem is that I think the Generation 2 Pokemon that you can catch are at a very low level, meaning that if you want to use one in like the rematches, you're gonna have to grind it up a little bit. Overall, however, I think this is a solid post-game, either on par with or better than Gen 2's post-game. Now, you may have noticed that for Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, I haven't talked about a certain part of the game yet. Well, don't fret, my friends, because I would never be foolish enough to forget. Ruby and Sapphire introduced Pokemon contests, where 4 Pokemon compete to win in one of 5 categories: cool, beauty, cute, smart, or tough. There are 2 parts to a Pokemon contests: the primary and secondary judging. To summarize, in primary judging, your Pokemon will be judged based on their contest conditions and sheen. The higher these are, the more hearts they'll get. In the secondary judging, your Pokemon will be judged based on the moves they use, as well as when they use them, since certain moves can be used to make combos, which in turn gives them more hearts. Whichever Pokemon has culminated the most amount of hearts throughout the whole contest will be crowned the winner. While this isn't a part of the main game, more so a side quest, I did find it fun. However, I do think there is a lot you need to know before going into contests. First of all, your Pokemon's level up move pool will ultimately decide if they're worthy of entering certain contests. I say this because similar to types, every move now has a condition. From personal experience, I can tell you that your Pokemon should have at least 2 moves whose condition corresponds with the contest they're in. This means that Roselia, for example, is not very well suited to the likes of cute, cool, or tough contests. But I hear your plea. Trashenstein, what about TMs and HMs? TMs you might need in order to beat tough trainers, and there's usually only one of each TM, making them more valuable. I would therefore only recommend using TMs for contests if you know for certain that this Pokemon could use it in both battles and contests, or you know that you won't use it in battle. As for HMs, most of them are either not good for contests or too late in the game. Some TMs you could technically get more of, and some HMs are actually decent for contests. As for when your Pokemon should enter contests, it all depends on what moves they currently know. If they have a good contest move pool around level 20 to 40, I'd say they can start entering. Granted, this means that some Pokemon can't start entering contests until you get to around Lilycove in Ruby and Sapphire, but honestly, this is probably better. Throughout the game, you'll collect berries, which can be used to make Pokeblocks, which in turn can raise your Pokemon's condition and sheen. The berries you find later in the games are typically better for Pokeblocks than the ones you find in the early game. This may be the reason why in Emerald there is only a single contest hall in Hoenn, located in Lilycove. Though I hear you asking once more, how do I get the best condition and sheen for my Pokemon? Well, for starters, your Pokemon should have a nature that goes well with their type of contest. An attack boosting nature, for example, will make your Pokemon like spicier Pokeblocks, which is good for raising the cool condition. This is probably the one time the feeders in the Safari Zone are useful, so you can get a Pokemon with a specific nature. The berries you use to make said Pokeblocks should also not only raise the main condition, but also the ones next to it, as they will also affect how many hearts you get in the primary judging. Make sure that you make Pokeblocks with the right amount of NPCs, however, as their quantity can change the outcome of the Pokeblock. The produced Pokeblock should also have a low feel, as the lower the feel, the slower the sheen will rise, meaning that you can then feed your Pokemon even more Pokeblocks. Also, for the primary judging, you don't need to get the highest amount of hearts, as you can still win via the secondary judging. But your Pokemon should still be close to the others' primary judged points. But, okay, you got a decent amount of hearts in the first round. What should your moveset look like? As I said before, you should have at least 2 moves that match the contest you're in. Not only do you get slightly more points for using matching moves, but also using the same move twice is usually not so good, as you lose points for doing so. This is not the only reason, however. When any Pokemon uses a matching move, this meter of judgment slowly fills up. And when it reaches max, whenever Pokemon used the last matching move gets rewarded handsomely in hearts. This means that if you only have one matching move that you then used in the previous turn, you won't get those points, since you won't have any more matching moves to use. Granted, having just matching moves is possibly not ideal either, as it could result in your opponents getting all those points instead. I don't stand as firmly for this statement, as I did use Pokemon with a full matching move pool all the way to Master Rank. It should also be noted that different moves also reward different amounts of hearts and different effects. I recommend having 2 moves which by themselves can give you many points, or 2 moves which can be used in a combo to reward yourself with extra points. There are direct combos like Double Team and Quick Attack, which will reward you extra points simply for being used in a certain order. Direct combos cannot be stacked with each other, by the way. There are also indirect combos, like Focus Punch and Takedown. Focus Punch will make your Pokemon move later next turn, which works well for Takedown, who benefits from being used later. This is because certain moves can lower your earned hearts, and if you use Takedown before they used a move like that, then you will lose a lot of points. Of course, you yourself can use moves like this, as well as moves that protect you from losing hearts to begin with. You could and should also have one good attacking move to make battles easier, as moves good for contests aren't always good for battling. Whew, that sure is a lot, huh? That's one of my issues with Pokemon contests. Not a whole lot is explained. This is especially bad since if you don't know how Sheen and Pokeblocks work, you might not get the best condition for your Pokemon, which is worsened by the fact that once your Sheen is full, you can't change your condition. Another problem is that you kinda don't get anything for completing the Master Rank for all, let alone one condition. You can get a big painting in Lily Cove Museum and an extra ribbon for your Pokemon, but this can very easily be missed since you need to talk to the museum's curator before winning the Master Rank in order to receive said rewards. I think it'd be pretty cool to have like a special trainer that shows up in the final Master Rank of each condition, to make the final rank feel more special and conclusive. As for the rewards you get, I think we can keep the museum part minus having to talk to the curator. But also, as another reward, you also get like a special Pokemon with a special move or ability that the Pokemon doesn't normally have. To summarize my ramblings, here's what you should do to win Pokemon contests from normal rank to Master Rank. First, look up the moves of the Pokemon you want to use. It should look good up to level 40, and with all the TMs and HMs you can obtain up to Lily Cove. If this is all good, I recommend catching that Pokemon with an appropriate nature to get the most out of Pokeblocks. Its move pool should at least have 2 matching moves, and the 4 moves at your disposal should give you high points and not your opponents. Moves to protect from or cause heart loss is beneficial but optional. You should also make Pokeblocks that raise your main and secondary conditions as much as possible, with the berries you can find before Lilycove. These berries should, however, raise your sheen as little as possible, to give your Pokemon the most Pokeblocks they can get. But of course, all of this could be wrong. I am speaking from my limited experience with contests, which by themselves have a hint of randomness. Though I do believe that most of what I've said is the best way to go. Like anything in this world, Generation 3 has its fair share of flaws. We unfortunately still have returning flaws, such as the low HP beeping, and most Stone Evos not learning many new moves upon level up. Of course, the typing of moves still determines whether or not they're physical or special, meaning that some Pokemon don't have stats that match well with their own typing. I still believe that the biggest flaw is that not all Pokemon can be caught with just one game. Basically, I think it's very disappointing that you either need to have other people to train with, or have multiple system games and the right tech in order to get the version and playthrough exclusive Pokemon. I don't think trading should be banished to the Doom dimension, but I do think trade evos and other Pokemon obtained via trading should be obtainable by some other means. But of course, these aren't the only flaws found in Generation 3. One new weather condition was added in Generation 3, Hail, where upon being set on the field, every Pokemon that is an Ice type loses some HP every turn, sorta like Sandstorm, and like Sandstorm, it's not that useful. Yet. Yeah, Hail does very little this generation. No abilities or moves that cause or interact with Hail, none of that. There is Weather Ball, but only one Pokemon can learn that. It doesn't help either that, unlike Sandstorm, Hail only benefits one type instead of 3. Hail does get better later on, but for now, it stinks. Hidden machines are still around and kicking, still being necessary to beating the game and requires the move deleter to be taken off your Pokemon. This time around we have 8 HMs for Hoenn, with 2 new ones. Rock Smash, upgrading from a TM, allows you to smash rocks, and Dive, which allows you to go underwater. While there are more HMs now, only 5 are necessary for progression, just like Gen 2. Though I still think it's lame that you have to either put certain moves on your Pokemon, or dedicate a Pokemon just to these moves, since most of these moves aren't that great for battles, compared to others. And again, another Water type HM? We did get a Fighting type HM, but still, can we get out of the pool and choose another type for the sake of variety? This generation was the one to start with mandatory tutorials, where no matter how experienced you are, you have to watch the tutorial. Granted, I think Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald handle tutorials better than others, as while you have to watch Wally capture a Pokemon, it also introduces us to his character, meaning that it's not just a catching tutorial. Even so, this generation was the one to start forcing tutorials upon you, and that I am not happy about.
There is none.
Okay, that's technically not true. There is a battle tower like in Pokemon Crystal, where you can battle a bunch of trainers. There is arguably even a goal this time around, where if you win 50 and 100 times in a row, you'll get a decoration for your secret base, and for 56 when in level 50 and level 100 mode respectively, your Pokemon gets a ribbon. I haven't really talked about secret bases since I didn't find them to be a big part of the game, but basically, you can make a base in like a cave or tree or something, and in there you can put decorations in. With all that being said, I usually don't like these kind of battle facilities. I think it's good that there's stuff to do in the post-game, but I just can't stand the whole streak system where if you lose, you're gonna have to start all over again. After entering the Hall of Fame, the option to rematch gym leaders becomes available to you. They have stronger teams and they're in double battles? And they use moves good for double battles like Protect, Fake Out, and Helping Hand? Oh, this sounds awesome. I can't wait to... No! They had a great concept and they ruined it. They ruined it hard. Why? Why do I have to battle 60 wild Pokemon or 20 trainers just to be given the chance of rematching one gym leader? You don't even get to fight them at their strongest right away. You have to wait until their 4th rematch just to face them at the top of their game. God damn it. And you know what? This isn't even the only post-game content I think they messed up. I think the Battle Frontier could have been good. Great, even. But one aspect of the Battle Frontier, one singular aspect of the Battle Frontier, ruined the whole goddamn thing. I was actually looking forward to the Battle Frontier. I even dabbled in team building and was ready to get specific natures and EV train my Pokemon to get the strongest Pokemon I could get. But when this aspect hit me like a truck, any and all motivation to continue was dead. What was this aspect? Simple. The streak system. I knew going in that there was going to be a streak system where if I wanted to get the gold medal for each facility, I was going to have to win several battles in a row without losing. But when I played the Battle Factory and repeatedly had to start over and over and over again, it became clear that if I were to continue, my soul would be crushed if I was going to have to do this for 7 facilities in total. Call me a weak gamer all you want, I don't care. I refuse to believe that I should have to redo 41 battles just to be able to jump back to the 42nd. You could have kept the streak system. Just divide the battles needed for silver and gold medals separately. Oh, but just go for the silver medals, I hear you say, but I say nay! Either I go all the way or I don't go at all. I despise the streak system. Take a game like Super Mario Bros. For example. First of all, well, that game had continues and world skips, but even if it didn't, I could at least admit that how well you play early on will affect how far you can get later in the game. This is because all the collected 1-ups and coins that can be turned into 1-ups can allow you to go even further. In Emerald's Battle Frontier, how well you play early on has no direct impact on how far you get, which just makes the whole process feel even more stale and boring. If you like the Battle Frontier, honestly, more power to you. I won't hold that against you, but I just can't enjoy it. If you came to this video expecting me to go into detail about every facility, I'm sorry, that I cannot deliver upon, as I only played the Battle Factory up until I didn't have fun anymore. Go check out other people's videos on the Battle Frontier if you're really interested, as I don't think I should talk about any of the facilities when I haven't even played most of them. Moving on from that train wreck of a segment, we have Fire Red and Leaf Green's flaws. These games share problems with the other Gen 3 games like low HP beeping, issues with stone evos, type determining moves, forced tutorials, and that you can't beat the game by yourself that easily. However, there are some unique cons to these games in particular. A lesser problem is the TM case. Instead of having its own part in the bag, it's now an item that you have to enter in order to get the TMs. I just think this is unnecessary and weird since previous games had TMs in their own part of the bag. Another disappointment in these games is no Gen 2 Pokemon before the post-game. This means that some Gen 1 Pokemon can't evolve into their Gen 2 evolutions before you beat the game. I don't really see why they did this. Did they want to stay true to the original games or something? Either way, I can't really agree with this decision. The player having several advantages over most other trainers is something I still very much dislike. The extra challenge that comes with being on more equal footing is something I would have greatly appreciated, but alas. But hey, at least abilities aren't exclusive to just the player, and some trainers do actually put held items on their Pokemon, even if it is usually just a citrus berry most of the time. Like I've brought up in the 2 previous videos, trainers could have slightly more random teams, as well as having more direct advantages over the player, to make the game more difficult. Though this is merely what I want, a cock-crushingly hard game isn't for everyone, and that is something I think we all need to respect, even if it's not to our liking. That being said, we are also allowed to want games that are more to our liking. Another factor of the difficulty I haven't talked about before is the amount of effort you decide to put in. If you beat everyone in your path, then you'll be stronger and richer, which can reduce the need for grinding. However, this might make the game longer and easier, which may not be to your liking. On the other hand, you have those who only battle if absolutely necessary, meaning they have a comparatively weaker team, thus resulting in a higher challenge. Although it could also mean having to grind more. For the early Pokemon games, I personally fall more into the former group, but since I still value challenge, I usually get a new Pokemon when I feel too strong. This means less experience for my stronger Pokemon, meaning that I won't become too overpowered for my enjoyment of the game. But enough of that, let's talk more about how I would change the difficulty of the important trainers. I've already talked about your rivals, evil team leaders, Norman and the champion, so I'll talk about the Elite Four and the remaining gym leaders. Also, all of these battles will be in doubles format, since that's what I wish the game to be. I will also use the move tutor moves in Emerald, of which I will pretend are also in Ruby and Sapphire. With all that being said, let's begin. Roxanne and Brawly I think are fine in terms of when you can fight them. I'd go with their Emerald team since I think it's slightly harder. For Watson, I'd replace 2 of his Pokemon for Plusle and Minun, who not only get more powerful thanks to their abilities, but also they can power up the other Pokemon with Helping Hand. Starting with Flannery, I want gym leaders to start using more held items and stop specializing in one type, to prevent the trainer from easily sweeping their whole team. With this in mind, I gave her Spoink, since they're found close to where she lives, as well as Lombre, since her gym is in Laveridge Town, aka Hot Spring Town. Hot Springs have water, which is half of Lombre's typing. Moving on, we have Winona, fan of all things flying, so let's give her a Masquerain, to give her that Intimidate ability. And then of course we have Moss Jeep Gym with Glacia. Oh, what's that? Glacia's a member of the Elite Four. Not anymore! Since the Icy Shoal Cave is close to Moss Deep, the Ice type having very little Pokemon, Hail not being that good, Glacia not being that interesting of a character, and Tate and Liza having more potential for interesting team building, I decided to demote Glacia to the rank of Gym Leader instead. For Wallace's Gym Leader team, I'm thinking it can be the same as his Champion team, minus the Raichu, changing the levels, and some of the moves. Juan, I similarly want to lean into his contest chicanery, so I gave him 5 Pokemon, 1 for each condition with move pools that are also good for contests. Moving on to the Elite Four, we have Sydney. Similar to Glacia, there is very little to work off of to make his team more interesting, but he does claim to like offense over defense, so I remade his team to reflect that more. Now he's an offensive powerhouse, and the only time he's not attacking, it's just to make his Pokemon even stronger. Phoebe's team was much easier to make. She trains at Mount Pyre, so let's give her more Pokemon from Mount Pyre. With Glacia demoted, Tate and Liza are now promoted to the now Elite 5. I wanted their teams to have a theme of counterparts beyond their ace Pokemon. I know Starmie and Claydol aren't really counterparts, but they do have a lot in common, such as being genderless psychic types with weird eyes, where both learn similar moves such as Rapid Spin, Harden, and Cosmic Power. Of course, we also have Zangoose and Seviper, which I think is such a power move, having 2 Pokemon known for generational feuds working together. Finally, we have Drake, whose wardrobe indicates a familiarity with the sea, so let's have a team that reflects that more. Fire Red and Leaf Green do have a lot of the player advantages found in previous games, but I will say the held item advantage isn't as prominent here, since for some reason the game didn't really give out that many good held items until the post-game. As for the gym leaders, I think most of them got improved teams compared to the Gen 1 teams. Brock got a stab move for his Onyx, Misty got recover for her Starfish, Lieutenant Surge and Erika has full move pools on all their Pokemon, although Surge did lose Thunderbolt on his Raichu and Erika lost Sleep Powder on her Victreebel. Similarly, Koga's Weezing lost Self-Destruct, but his Muk more than makes up for it as it's now an incredibly annoying stall Pokemon. Sabrina became comparatively much worse with Psychic's nerf in Gen 2, but I do think all the move pulls became better overall, even though I would have kept Stun Spore for Venomoth and Psychic for Kadabra. Blaine got better move pulls for his Pokemon, and having Intimidate on his Arcanine is nothing to sneeze at either. Giovanni. What happened? Every other one of your Pokemon upgraded from Red and Blue besides the Rhydon, which did the exact opposite. Yeah, it has a better move pull, but still, why? But even so, at least the rest of his team became better from Red and Blue, but Yellow I think still has his best team. The Elite Four also got overall stronger teams, with their move pulls becoming better than before. Blue I'm also very happy to see got an upgrade. Having 1 or 2 Intimidate users, his Executor having a full move pull, his Rhydon not having Tail Whip and Leer, and overall just better moves on all his Pokemon. And if you still want a challenge, then you also have the rematch battles, where all their teams are even stronger, giving you one of the most challenging gauntlets of trainers yet. Of course, most of these trainers still suffer from only using one type of Pokemon, so here are some suggestions to Pokemon they could add. I won't do a super detailed team sheet this time around for a very simple reason. I'm lazy. Starting with Surge, he can get a Pidgeotto to replace his Voltorb, to serve as a carrier pigeon and a check for ground types. Erika can get a Poliwhirl to replace her Tangela, to water her plants and to deal with fire and ice attacks. Koga can replace one of his Koffing with a Hypno to be even more annoying and to resist Psychic type attacks. Sabrina I could see getting a Hitmonlee to counter Bug and Dark types as it knows the move Meditate, but if not, she can get a Golduck with Aerial Ace and Brick Break to do the same job. Considering where he lives, I think Blaine could get a Weezing, Aerodactyl and Omastar to replace his Ponyta and Growlithe, to deal with water, ground and rock type attacks. Finally, for Giovanni, he evolves his Rhyhorn firstly, and then gets a Gengar and Kabutops for his Rhyhorn and Dugtrio, to tie back to Team Rocket's shenanigans at Mount Moon and Lavender Town. This also allows him to handle ice, grass, and water types better. When it comes to version differences between Ruby and Sapphire, I think they finally did something more than just version exclusive Pokemon. Sure, I would have liked more than 6 exclusive lines of Pokemon per version, but I can at least appreciate that the story has different characters with different motivations in the different versions. Before I start talking about some version exclusive problems with Emerald, it should be mentioned that Generation 3 introduced the Regional Dex and National Dex. The Regional Dex consists of Pokemon found in the region you're in, while the National Dex is every Pokemon ever. If you complete either one, you'll get a diploma, a reward that's been around since the first generation. While the feeling of completion is a reward in and of itself, having your efforts be recognized does feel nice. Emerald even took it a step further, where upon the completion of the Regional Dex, you get to pick between one of the 3 Johto starters. However, as I've talked about before, you can't complete the Pokédex without having several games and consoles at your disposal, whether it's the Regional or National Dex. You need both Ruby and Sapphire to complete the Regional Dex in either one, and for Emerald, you need it and both Ruby and Sapphire, because Lunatone is only in Sapphire and Zangoose is only in Ruby. As much as I dislike having to trade for completion, if you're gonna have it that way, at least don't make me have to have 3 games just to complete the Regional Dex in one game. If I could have it my way, bare minimum, I would have the Regional Dex be completable regardless of how many games, consoles, or friends you have. The National Dex I'm fine with not completing. As long as there is one Dex I can complete by myself, I'll be satisfied. As for Fire Red and Leaf Green, with these games being remakes, I can understand why there aren't that many version differences, since they probably wanted to stay close to the originals. However, with their post-game, I can recognize that there are way more exclusive Pokemon, which does make the different versions a little more justified.
In summary, I think Gen 3 made great improvements regarding the graphics and especially the music. I think the addition of forms and Pokemon dabbling in some lore to be a welcome addition. I like most of the new Pokemon, but I think some of them could have been improved in terms of design or deserving of an evolution. The story for Hoenn had way more characters this time around. However, I felt like a lot of the characters had concepts that could have been expanded upon, were comparatively not as good as similar trainers before, and or had confusing motivations. Gen 3 did bring new interesting additions such as abilities, contests, and double battles. Contests I did enjoy, despite perhaps not being that clear on what to do, but double battles I feel like weren't used enough for how good of a concept it is. Pokemon Emerald had the great addition of a bigger post-game compared to Ruby and Sapphire, but I feel like the execution could have been way better. Another thing I didn't like was that this generation started using mandatory tutorials. The one in Hoenn did arguably work as more than a tutorial, but it still set a pattern for later generations to follow, which I find disappointing. Moving on to Fire Red and Leaf Green, I think they were mostly great remakes of Red and Blue, having improvements and additions found in previous games, and an actual post-game truly made these games feel like upgrades to the original games. Granted, these games had their own flaws, such as not being able to obtain certain Gen 2 evolutions of Gen 1 Pokemon. I still also think that there are several problems that haven't really been solved from previous games. Certain Stone Evo's move pool being too small, the requirement for HMs, Pokemon sometimes having types that don't match their stats, and being unable to complete the game by yourself, just to name some of them. The difficulty of these games I also wish were a little higher, as I think trainers should be on more equal footing with the player by, for example, using more held items and Pokemon. Moreover, I think trainers shouldn't specialize in just one type, as it allows the player to more easily sweep their whole team. Beyond that, I also think that having the Hoenn games be in a doubles format not only would have made the games more challenging, but also make them stand out from previous entries. Fire Red and Leaf Green I can understand for staying mainly in singles, as they are remakes of singles games. Differences I think are also starting to be expanded upon, with different stories and more exclusive Pokemon. However, Emerald's handling of exclusive Pokemon has the same problem as Crystal, where you now need even more games just to complete one Pokédex. But overall, I still had a good time. My final grade for all Gen 3 games shall be 9 out of 10. Grades may change later. Like now, I'm changing the Gen 1 games from a 7 to a 6, as with the remakes and Gen 3 as a whole, I don't think these games look as good anymore. Thank you to the few people watching this video, it means a lot. I won't be uploading a new crap review for a while, as I wish to focus on my crap comics instead. You can check out some of my work if you wanna. There's a link in the description. Okay, bye-bye now.